in words that strike a more responsive chord with modern readers than do earlier chroniclers. Soldiers have assuredly talked to each other in the same expletive undeleted language throughout history, from Gideon's and Leonidas's 300s through the armies of Henry V and Cromwell to the 21st century. But successive generations compiled very different records. Early accounts are, to our eyes, less intimate, more opaque. The two world wars generated the richest reminiscences because they swept into armies millions of citizens more articulate than are most professional soldiers, some being possessed of literary brilliance. Wherever possible, I favour stories recounted by contemporaries, though it's doubtful that the writer of the Book of Joshua witnessed the fall of Jericho, if such an event even took place. The biblical quotations are taken from the King James I edition because the beauty of its language is irresistible. Dr. Johnson quoted a French savant who noted that there are many puerilities in war. Most of those who fight are young, and thus the spirit of armies is distilled from a mingling of soldiers' physical vigour and intellectual immaturity with their licenses to kill and opportunities to die. Some familiar stories, such as those of Joan of Arc and Sir John Moore at Corunna, are included. Others, however, such as Michael Strawn's vignette of Colonel J. Enoch Powell in 1943 North Africa and Rory Stewart's 2004 experience of Iraq, may come fresh. There's a rich infusion of tales from the Peninsula because the campaign yielded so many memoirs. I've omitted or included only brief passages about several remarkable characters, for instance, Marcel Marbeau, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, Gustavus Burnaby, whom I explored in my earlier book, Warriors. Rather than citing the highest authorities, I draw upon writers and narratives that have stirred my own imagination over a lifetime. Modern scholars scorn, for instance, C.V. Wedgwood's writings on the English Civil Wars, those of Cecil Woodham Smith about the Crimea, and Barbara Tuchman's big books. Would that those dismissive academics wrote a fraction so well. All three women were brilliant narrative historians who've been my faithful companions for 60 years. I likewise include several of Elizabeth Longford's vignettes of Wellington. Her account of the June 1815 Duchess of Richmond's ball before Waterloo, that glittering revelry by night, is more vivid than that of any other writer I know, save Byron and Thackeray. My purpose is to sound notes that ring true about the warrior's condition. The pervasive thesis is that of Lord Tedder, Eisenhower's 1944-45 Deputy Supreme Commander in Northwest Europe. War is organized confusion. Early pages emphasize the doings of the great because posterity is informed about them. We possess hundreds of pages of Caesar's shamelessly self-serving writings, almost none from his legionaries. Later passages tell us more about humble folk. For example, Private William Wheeler in the Napoleonic Wars. Once the poor became widely literate, they too compiled records such as do not survive from earlier times. Some of the contributors loomed large in my own life. Nicholas Tomlin, who wrote a black comic account of a 1966 helicopter ride in Vietnam with an American general, was a close friend and brilliant war correspondent, killed on the Golan Heights in 1973, a few miles from where I was myself watching the Israelis fighting for their lives against the Syrians. Professor Sir Michael Howard, OMCH-MC, who died in 2019, was a lifelong mentor who profoundly influenced my view of history and indeed of everything. Other historians whose work is represented here are admired friends such as Rick Atkinson and Anthony Beaver, the late John Keegan and Ronald Lewin. My father was editing the old Strand magazine